Good morning everyone, my name is Michelle. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another video. It's Tuesday morning, it's the 27th of December, which means it's one of those awkward days between Christmas and New Year. If you're off work, for example, you start losing track of time, track of days. What day is it really? Well, it's Tuesday. Anyway, sticking with the Idaho 4 murders today. And I've got a few things to talk through. I want to talk about what Maddie's dad has said in the press. I want to talk about the murder weapon. I want to talk about what Jennifer Coffendaff has said. And I want to talk about where we are now and my profile. Okay, so that's a lot. And I'm trying to do it in double quick time. So I keep these videos really concise, really watchable. They're easy to share out. They're easy to watch. So please do share my videos with your own social networks and it gets my channel noticed. And it's one of the main things you can do to help me out. All right, let's start with Maddie's dad. So Fox News, I'm pretty sure that other media have picked up on this as well. But this was posted last night. And it says, Idaho murder victim's dad believes killer will be caught. This isn't something that people get away with. Ben Morgan, father of slain University of Idaho student Madison Morgan, said he's confident that whoever is responsible for the stabbing death of his daughter and her friends Kaylee Gonzalez, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin will be caught and brought to justice. Speaking to the Spokesman Review newspaper, Morgan explained that for a crime like this, it would be too difficult for the perpetrator to evade detection. And this is what he said. From the very beginning, I've known that people don't get away with these things these days, Morgan told the outlet. There are too many things that you can get caught on, like DNA and videos everywhere. This isn't something that people get away with that goes unsolved. At the same time, though, he's frustrated that 6 weeks into the investigation, there is still much that remains unknown. There are so many questions that I figured would be answered, and we're still waiting, he said. Morgan said investigators have been in touch with him every day to provide updates. If he goes multiple days without answering their calls, the lead investigator calls his family to check up on him. That's really good. That's really good. State investigators have been getting outside help, including the FBI. Morgan said that with all the resources, they should be able to solve this case. I have to just know that they know what they're doing. And if they don't, then they know someone that does, he said. I think that's a well-measured interview. It's only short, but I think he's right. I think he's absolutely right. With the technologies that forensic investigators have at their disposal, there's no way that this killer is going to get away with this. Stabbing 4 people with what could be a K-bar knife would have left evidence. This is why I don't think it was a professional hit. This is why I think this is someone who's planned it, but who's planned it specifically to be a knife killing. If this was a professional hit, the perpetrator would have used a gun. It would have been much cleaner. With a knife, as I've said multiple times in videos, there's a big risk. There's a big risk that that knife is going to slip, that they're going to lose it, that a victim is going to overpower them, and they drop the knife and the victim manages to grab it and stab back. It's important to consider these things. Was there DNA at the scene? I suspect, unless the perpetrator fully covered up, which they may well have done, including gloves, including a mask, so that there was absolutely no way that if the victims fought back, and we know from Steve Gonzalez, Kaylee's dad, that 2 of them did, then there'll be DNA under the victim's fingernails. But if that knife did slip, if the perpetrator just nicked themselves, however slightly, there is going to be a transfer of DNA. The other big problem concerning DNA is that was a party house. We've seen body cam of many people in that house. We've heard an interview from someone who used to live there before Xana, Maddie, Kaylee and the other 2 surviving roommates moved in. And it was a party house when he lived there. So there's going to be DNA everywhere. So the specific locations of where the DNA, where the foreign DNA is found, is going to be very important to the forensic team. So DNA on the victims. If there is foreign DNA on the victims, then it's very difficult for a defence to argue that that didn't come from just a random person in the house, especially if it's in key locations like near the wounds or under fingernails. And it's very difficult for a defence to argue if there's DNA under more than one victim's fingernails, then how did it get there? So I think that's where the forensic teams are going to be looking specifically. Now, what if the perpetrator didn't leave any DNA? Well, that's a different story. If there's no foreign DNA at all on the victims, that shows a level of skill and level of planning that's very, very impressive, and tells me that this was exceedingly well planned and executed by someone who does have a great deal of knife skill. Now, the Law and Crime Network did a piece yesterday, 13 hours ago as I record this, and this was top discoveries so far. So they kind of went through some of the things that we've talked about here on this channel, that have been talked about on other channels, that have been talked about by law enforcement. I wish mainstream media networks wouldn't keep going with some of the things, like, was there a scream heard on the body cam footage? No, there wasn't. 3:12 a.m. That was not a scream. The officers, there's 2 officers there, and there's 3 people being booked for underage drinking. If there was a scream that was unusual, wouldn't they have stopped and looked and acknowledged that there was an unusual sound? And they didn't. But that's just my gripe. These are things that are still being talked about, which I think are potentially misleading. But there's some good stuff in this, so I'll leave a link to it in the description box. It's only short, it's only 12 minutes long. I'm going to play you a couple of clips from this. The first one about the defensive wounds.
And it's also been reported that some have had defensive wounds, indicating that they may have fought off the attacker or the attackers, which creates a number of different questions in terms of forensics and DNA and what was left behind at the crime scene or on the attacker or attackers.
So in terms of the defensive wounds, as I said, it's important to think about how well planned this could have been and whether the perpetrator left any DNA at all at the scene. But it's the big risk that this person took using a knife in this style of attack. If they planned to kill all of the people in the house, for example, and then ended up in a fight, which Steve Gonsalves said was one hell of a battle on the second floor, then we have to think about, was this an act of femicide, which I'm going to come on to. But in terms of the defensive wounds, I find it difficult to believe that there wouldn't have been any DNA transfer whatsoever. But it is possible. But if they've got DNA, then the process of elimination, they can rule out family members, they can rule out the people in the closest kind of echelons of the victims' inner circle, so to speak. So they can rule out people who are willing to give DNA samples. We don't know how many people have given DNA samples. They can rule people out. They can rule people like Jack D out, Jack S out, and all the other people that are being talked about on social media who, police have said, are not persons of interest at this moment in time. We don't know why people have been ruled out. You know, we don't know why Hoodie Guy was ruled out. We don't know why Jack D was ruled out. People are speculating that the police haven't done a good enough job in checking people's alibis and so on. Well, we don't know. We don't know what evidence they've got. This moment in time, at least, I'm going to trust that law enforcement have done their due diligence and they know that these people are not involved. So then you have to look outside of that inner circle. In terms of the murder weapon, a K-bar style knife, this military style weapon, I've said in my profile, which I'll come on to shortly, that this could be somebody with military training, somebody who's been in the military, or a military wannabe.
And the type of knife that they're talking about is the United States Marine Corps K-bar. So when I saw this, my thought is that, is this person prior military? So the specific weapon, if they're talking about a K-bar, which is what this is, then there's a possibility that they need to look into military background of some kind.
I should tell you that the general manager of a building supply store in Moscow told the media that the police had asked him whether he sold anyone K-Bar brand knives, but police indicated that they aren't solely looking for that type of knife.
And I don't think this was bought especially for this murder. I think this person likes knives. I think this person probably has more than one bladed instrument in their possession. They probably collect weapons. Who knows? But I think this person has knife skill that they've practiced in whatever way that might be. Could be hunting animals, for example. All right, so before we leave Law and Crime Network and talk about femicide, I just want to play you this next clip about the coroner.
Reported by the coroner, Kathy Mabbitt, that she spoke with the Gonsalves family about these autopsy findings. And that's when we heard from Stephen Gonsalves, Kaylee's father, that the wounds were different than Maddie's, that Kaylee's wounds were different from Maddie's, perhaps more excessive. And if that is true, it again makes you wonder whether Kaylee was the target. But this created drama as well. The coroner describing the gruesome details became a particular point of issue with the Gonsalves family attorney.
I have issues with the coroner. Number one, expressing all of her opinions over the media at, I think, at inappropriate times, number one. Number two, making a personal phone call and describing graphic details of what she discovered and what she to the family, I don't think was beneficial in any way.
Yeah, I mean, the coroner has come under significant criticism. I talked about in a live, was it the case that she told Steve Gonsalves that there was one hell of a battle on the second floor? Fox News reported on it. We've never had clarification, not proper clarification, as to whether what Fox News reported was truthful or not. Kaylee's sister, Olivia, came out and said that Steve hadn't spoken to the coroner and hadn't spoken to Fox News about this. But I haven't heard that from Steve's mouth himself. And I wonder whether what was reported there, as in large gouges, was the truth. That this was a very vicious attack, but also very targeted to hit internal organs and things like that. And somebody doing that kind of killing 4 times over has to be strong and fit. And it has to be somebody who's got confidence in their knife skill. So the things that the coroner has come out and said might be inappropriate, but it has given us some information. And that is useful information when we consider who this perpetrator is, what type of person they might be. Now, this was reported a couple of days ago on Newsweek, and this is Jennifer Coffendaffer, who is an ex-FBI agent who shared the femicide theory. So let's read through this article. The murder of 4 University of Idaho students last month may be a case of femicide, according to a former FBI agent. Kaylee, Maddie, Xana and Ethan were found dead in an off-campus rental home on November 13th. The women lived at the house with 2 other female roommates who survived the attack, while Ethan was Xana's boyfriend who was visiting. So investigators on the case will be looking at everybody associated with each victim, starting with their families and inner circles, said Jennifer Coffendaffer, a former FBI agent. Because it hasn't been solved yet, I believe they're past the inner circle of these individuals. Perhaps it's more of an outlying individual, she told Newsweek. I think that is absolutely right. I think, they start with the closest people to the victims. So they'll start with where the family were. They'll start with the surviving roommates. They'll then move on to people in the inner circle who were the last people to see Kaylee and Maddie. So they were able to rule out Hoodie Guy. They were able to rule out the driver who took Kaylee and Maddie home. They were able to rule out Jack D, Kaylee's ex. I know a lot of people, half of America, as we talked about yesterday, think that Jack D did it, but they've been able to rule him out as well as they can rule anybody out in a case like this. You know, there's always the possibility that they're going to go back to somebody if new information comes along, but at this moment in time, they have set those people closest to the victims aside. One thing that does concern me is that the police are still looking, as far as I'm aware, are still looking for more information about what Ethan and Xana got up to at the Sigma Chi party. And the frat boy theory, as I call it, I'm still very much of a mindset that that is a possibility, that it's somebody who was targeting Ethan and perhaps Xana rather than Kaylee and Maddie. All the conversation, most of the conversation at least, has been on who was targeting Kaylee and perhaps Maddie. But I think who was targeting Ethan and Xana is a more important discussion point at this moment in time, because we just don't know that key piece of information. Who was at that frat party? Was there really an argument that has been reported in some news outlets? However, Jennifer Coffindaffer did share some interesting comments. Coffindaffer said one theory is that the killer is somebody that may have built up anger against one or more of the slain students. Another theory she's leaning towards is that the killer is someone with perverted thoughts and anger towards women. In general, who took the opportunity to strike on the night of the murders. They're known as incels, who has watched this house, who is seeing all of these beautiful girls go in and out, and their rage and their own personal horrific desires, they realise that night. Somebody still in that area, somebody that has seen these beautiful girls because only girls live there, right? As an individual with absolutely horrible murderous desires against these women, a femicide type case, and it came to a boiling point combined with an opportunity. Femicide is described as the intentional murder of women because they are women. There are two categories of femicide, intimate and non-intimate. The former relates to the killing of women by current or former partners. I think the police will have looked at that very closely and perhaps will have ruled out current, former partners. We only know that they've ruled out Jack D. We don't know about other partners. We don't know about Xana's previous relationships. We don't know about Maddie's previous relationships. I guess there still might be question marks there, but we don't know. And my thought process has always been, if it's a person that's got a problem with one, then they'll just take out one. Why do four? You know, it would mean that this went awfully wrong. If three other people got in the way, why did they go in the house in the first place? If they knew that there was multiple occupants, how were they going to just kill one person if they knew there was multiple occupants? I don't know that this was targeted towards one person, you know, one specifically. But I'm open-minded. It is very much still on the cards that was a thing. But the other type of femicide, I think, is more likely in this particular situation. The latter involves the killing of women by people with whom they did not share an intimate relationship. The killer may have been someone who attended a party at the house or knew the victims very loosely, she added. In other words, the people there might not even know him, other than he was around the peripheral. But somebody who would have gone unnoticed, she said. So who would have got angrier and angrier because they were unnoticed. So you have the perfect storm that night, with this person familiar with the house, familiar with when they came and left, and familiar with that area to be able to leave quickly, familiar with the tree line of where they could have surveilled the house and seen the lights go on and off, and so forth. That could be why police have stated they believe the murders were targeted, but have not concluded if the house or its occupants were the target, she said. Coffin Daffer said that there has been many cases like that where people are attacked viciously, and it's not by anyone in their circle, but rather it is someone outside that circle completely that has issues in and of themselves and they've acted out on. She pointed to the 1979 murder of 18-year-old Michelle Martinko, whose killer, Jerry Burns, was arrested in 2018, 39 years after she was found dead in her parents' car outside a shopping mall in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Martinko wasn't killed by a close acquaintance, Coffin Daffer wrote in a recent tweet. The case was solved with DNA. DNA, perseverance and luck will likely solve the Idaho homicide case too. So I think she's got a good point there. That's a good summary of my third theory that I talked about recently. I did a video where I talked through the frat boy theory, where I talked about the stalker theory, and where I talked about the person targeting the household, you know, not a particular individual, but the household, because a number of girls live there, and that fits an incel profile very, very closely. So before I sign off, just let me remind you of the profile that I did very early on in this case. And this is it. This is my possible profile. And I've no reason to believe any one of these needs to change necessarily. So male, known but not in a circle, local to the area, killed before but not a serial killer. But if this is their first kill of humans, I am very, very concerned that they like this too much. They are too hate-fueled, but they enjoyed the killing. And they could become a serial killer in the future. Military training or ex-military. I'll team that with military wannabe as well. Used to blood and has got considerable knife skill. Has a criminal profile, so has committed crimes before, but may have a possible record, but may not. Just may have been committing minor crimes that haven't been caught. And then attitudinally, I think they're hypermasculine and they're misogynistic, which fits with the femicide theory that Coffin Daffer highlighted. A loner, but not necessarily living alone. They're narcissistic, they're Machiavellian. They display many traits of the dark triad, which I talked about the other day. And finally, they're a lone wolf. Now, this is the one that I'm not as sure about. It could be that there's other people who know about this case, about this murder, who were involved in the planning, who knew what the killer was going to do. I don't know whether more than one person actually carried out the killings, though. I'm not sure. In terms of like the frat boy theory, I think other people will know. But other theories, I'm not sure. It would be a lone wolf, in my opinion. So that's a lot that I've covered in a very short video. Well, not that short. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. I've been Michelle. Hope you're well. I'll see you in the next video. It's goodbye from Miss Tillington and Miss Cassie Springer. Bye, guys.